Okay, launch Photoshop. Click New File. In the New Document window, hit Print. We're going to title this document, capital letter E, underscore your last name, underscore bear. I want to make sure that it is a landscape document, dimensions 11 inches by 8.5 inches, resolution 300, RGB color, background contents, transparent. Click Create. I'm also going to go into my Finder where I've already downloaded each of those images from Google Classroom. And each of those images I'm going to take from my downloads image or my files. I'm going to drag them onto the Photoshop icon. This is going to open each of them. You can see now I've got my clouds, eagle, bear, sunset. I'm calling this the Moana Mountain. And then here's my new document. If you can't drag yours onto the Photoshop icon, what you can do is also say File Open and just open each of your files that way. So I'm going to navigate to the one called Clouds. I'm going to take my Move tool, press and hold down my mouse button, drag it up to my Bear document that's empty, and I'm not going to let go until my mouse is right over the center of the canvas. Then I'll let go. You can see this is a really large file, so I'm going to zoom out quite a bit. When I zoom out, I can see that bounding box around it, and I'm just going to probably make this just right about this size or so that I can actually see that it takes up the full height of this canvas. The width is a little bit long, and I'm okay with that. I'm just going to then hit my check mark just to apply that change. My clouds document that I still have open, I can then close it because I don't need it anymore. And on my layer tab, I'm just going to call this layer Clouds. All right, on this layer, what we're going to do next is to make a black layer mask. The way that we make a black layer mask is to go down to our little layer mask icon. Make sure you're on your clouds layer, by the way. You're going to hold down Option and click your mouse. That's going to create a black mask for you. I'm going to make sure I'm on my mask. I'm going to take my paintbrush, take a really large brush, make sure the hardness is down at 0%. Let's make sure that the size is, let's try, gosh, 2,000. Actually, let's do, I wonder how large we can go. Let's make it 3,000 by a hardness of 0. And at the top of your screen here where it says opacity, just put the opacity down at like maybe 35%. Now I want to make sure that we're also using white, so I'm going to hit the letter D to get my default colors. That gave me white as my foreground, but if for some reason you need to switch them, you can always hit the letter X key. So I want white to be my top color. Again, I'm on my mask, and I'm just going to click once or twice just right here in the middle, and that's it. I'm not going to click anymore. Then what I'm going to do is come down to my layer tab. I'm going to click on this little half white, half black circle. We're going to choose solid color, and I just want to choose kind of like a very light gray background color. I'm going to position my mouse or color picker right there. Click OK. Drag this to the bottom of your layer list. You're going to find that it'll look something like this. We now have an empty layer here on the bottom that we essentially don't need. So we'll click on it, hit the delete key, and that will disappear for us. At this point, even though you only have 2 layers, I would definitely do a file save as. See if you can save it to the cloud. If you cannot, save it to your desktop, but we just want to make sure that we're starting to save this. Next, what I'm going to do is go to the Bear document. Here it is right here. I'm going to go up to the word Select, down to Subject. Give my computer a minute just to try to make the selection around it. You can see it does a pretty good job. I'm going to then make a mask on this. It's still a little bit hard to see kind of the background in here, so what I'm going to do is just kind of, just so I can see what I have, add a solid color gradient, or just a solid color gray, I should say, drag it behind it. I feel like it just lets me see what I have and what I don't have a little bit better. I'm going to go back to the mask here and make my brush much, much smaller. So I'm using my bracket keys just to make that much smaller. And I can see that there's a little bit of haze around the bear here. I also see that I'm getting a little bit of this kind of funny little leaf or something right here. So I'm just going to switch over to black, make my opacity back at 100%. I'll zoom in a little bit more on this foot right here, and I'm just going to kind of hide that little bit, just like that. I want to make sure that I'm not taking off too much because I still want it to look like his foot, but at the same time I don't want to see these little leaves, so I'll kind of switch back and forth between black and white just so that I can kind of hide that. And that's looking pretty good. There's a little bit of kind of a little haze kind of around this, but I'm thinking it'll be fine from here. Okay, so I'm zooming back out. I'm going to take my move tool. I'm only going to take this layer of the bear. I'm not taking that little color fill, and just to make sure you can even delete it if you need to. But I'm going to take my move tool. Again, I'm going to press and hold my mouse button, drag up to that little bear document, drop it. I am going to scale him down just a little bit, and I'm also going to move him to the top of my layer list. While he's at the top or in the front, I'm going to choose Edit, down to Transform, and I'll choose Flip Horizontal because I'd like him facing this way. Okay, at this point I'm going to move him down just a smidge lower just so that I can see there's about that much room between his feet and the bottom of the document. I'm also going to take this clouds image and maybe see if I can drag my cloud image upward just a little bit so that I'm seeing a little bit more of the cloud that I showed or masked right here. Okay, from here, do another quick save. So File, Save, just to make sure you're updating yourself. We're going to come back to our Layer tab, make sure that we call this layer Bear. And then we're also going to go over to this little sunset mountain image and just zoom out a little bit, Command minus. I like this image. Right now it's really, really wide, and I kind of wish that it had a little bit more height to it. So I'm actually going to take my crop tool, make sure that the ratio is set to nothing right here. I also want to make sure that where it says up here, kind of fill, we're going to choose generative expand. And then I'm just going to move this up just a little bit like that. I'm also going to move it downward just a little bit. And then I'm going to hit this check mark. And I want to make sure that it kind of generates just kind of additional space up here, like what it would imagine would be a continuation of the clouds if it hadn't ended. Same thing down here. So I'm not going to type in a prompt, but rather just hit generate. It'll take us a couple seconds. You can see that this image is kind of an illustration. It's not exactly, it's more like a realistic illustration. I like that. I feel like it did a good job. I'm happy with it. So I'm going to keep that. And what I'm going to actually do here, just to make sure I get all of it, is I'm going to say flatten image. What that simply does is it takes that little generative extra layers that it had, makes everything one layer. Now I'm going to take my move tool. Same thing, I'm just going to drag this image right over to my little bear document, drop it right here. I'm going to scale it down just a little bit so that I can kind of see more of it. When it's over here on my layer tab, I'm just going to call this let's call it our sunset mountain, and then just hit return. And again, if you've made any change in terms of a scale adjustment, just make sure you hit that commit, and then again we're going to do a quick save. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a little bit just so that you can see this a little bit better. This sunset image, I want to scale down just a little bit, probably make it about this size or so, right about here. I might even turn my opacity down just a little bit so that I can see exactly where things are going to kind of match up here. I'm going to drag this in just a little bit. I'm kind of taking this little stream or path and kind of putting it right against or around the bear's kind of hind quarter there. When I feel like I have a good size adjustment, I'm going to put my opacity back at 100 and then hit this little check mark. Now here's the clipping mask portion. What we're going to do on our layer tab is we're going to position our mouse, our cursor, right in between the sunset mountain layer, which is at the top, and the bear layer. I'm going to hold down my Option key and just click and release my mouse once. So Option click, you're going to see that little clipping mask, meaning that the sunset is clipping to the mask of the bear. It's going to look like this, which I'm pretty happy with right now. I can still move this around if I need to. And so as I move it around, what I might do is just kind of bring this in just a little bit, maybe match that up just a little bit better. I feel like that's pretty good, kind of right about here. And so then I'm going to hit my check mark just to confirm it. And now I'm going to add a mask to the Sunset Mountain image. I'll add my mask right here. I'm going to take my paintbrush, working with black, just make sure I hit my letter D, then for me X, so I can use black. My brush size, I definitely want to use a soft brush, probably a bit higher in terms of size. I'm thinking maybe like, I don't know, maybe like 800 or so, but definitely a very soft brush. And I'm also going to put the opacity or the flow of my brush. I think I'll take the flow actually and put it down at about 60% or so. So I'm on my mask. What I'm going to do now is just to kind of click just a couple of times, just so that that hard edge kind of disappears. Maybe I'll even kind of click just a couple of times right over here so that I can see the edge of the bear. Here, I kind of like my brush really large just so that I can see some things. And notice that I'm keeping my brush really far kind of out to the side here because I want to see that ear, but I don't want to see that hard edge that I can kind of see anywhere else. And I'll just kind of start to mask certain things out just like that. Hi.
Am I allowed to?
Okay, next we're going to bring in the, what I'm calling the Moana Mountain image. I'm going to zoom out just so that you can see it a little bit better, see the full thing. Again, I'm going to choose select and then subject. The mountain should come over like this. It might grab a little bit of the seascape beneath it. That's totally fine. I'm going to hit the mask button and then take my move tool and again drag and drop it up onto this other image. Notice that mine comes in kind of large. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit, kind of scale it down a little bit. Please make sure when you're scaling it down that you're not using or holding down the shift key, but rather just scale it down as you normally would. I'm going to position it right here for a second and also choose edit, transform, and then flip horizontal because I want the little more well-lit side to be over here. Taking a look at my layer tab, I'm just going to do a little bit of renaming here. We're going to call this one Moana Mountain. If you've seen that movie Moana, it kind of reminds me of like the mountain that they have in there. I've also got a bunch of other documents that are still open that I don't need. So the bear I'm going to close. It may ask you if you want to save. You can hit don't save. The Sunset Mountain we're going to close. Again, you don't need to save that. The Moana Mountain, close, don't save. And really the only other document that I have open right now is the eagle, which we'll get to a little bit later. We're probably going to add a couple of other things to this. But this is what we have right now. So if you still have that confirmed change or the check mark up here to make sure that you know that you're confirming that change, you might just want to adjust it from there. And again, just do another quick save if you could. Okay, we've got our image back in here. I'm just zooming out a little bit. I'm on this Moana Mountain image and I'm just going to try to position it right about here. You might need to just increase or decrease your size just a little bit. I'm thinking right about here is kind of nice. And I want you to notice that just right over here by the left-hand side, the back of the bear, I'm seeing a little bit of the fur coming out right here, and I'm also seeing it extend just a little bit over the front, kind of by his ear. Now what we're going to do is hit that return key, and we're just going to adjust the color in it a little bit. I'm going to choose this little hue and saturation layer or adjustment layer, and I'm going to do hue and saturation, but I only want it to affect the layer, the Moana Mountain layer, so I want to make sure I hit this button. And I'm going to desaturate it just a little bit because I just want to bring out some of that color a little bit. If I went all the way, it would turn black and white. I'm not going to go all the way, but I am going to maybe move it to about -40%. And again, I can see that it's only affecting this Moana layer. I'm going to click on this mask, and this is where now I'm going to take my paintbrush, make sure my flow is at about 62. I'm going to put my opacity down around 70 or so. And I still have a fairly large brush. I'm going to make it just a little bit smaller, maybe about size 4 or 500, again with a hardness of 0. And making sure that I'm on the mask, now I'm just going to kind of click a handful of times just to get rid of this hard edge. Notice that I'm not holding down my mouse button, but rather just clicking just a couple of different times just to get rid of that nice hard edge that there was there. And I'll probably scale up my mouse just a little bit like this, making my brush really large, moving the brush down like this, and again, just kind of clicking just a couple of times just so that there's a really nice transition between that sunset sky and this little Moana mountain. And so I feel like that's a pretty good adjustment right about there. And now what I'm going to do is just take a good look at it and kind of see what I think. If you need to move it around a little bit, you absolutely still can. I just want to make sure, though, however, that this part of the mountain is hiding kind of the top of the bear, and that I can actually see some of the fur kind of sticking out right over on that side, which I think is pretty good. So far, so good. As I look at it, I like that I'm seeing a little bit of the fur from the actual bear. I like that I can kind of see a little bit of this. I might actually mask a little bit more out right here just so that I'm seeing more of the actual bear. And if that's the case, what I would do is come over to the Sunset Mountain mask. I would take my paintbrush. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller just by hitting those bracket keys. I'm using black with an opacity of 68. And what I'm going to do is just kind of mask just a little bit here so that I'm seeing more of the bear's fur. I'm also going to mask just a tiny bit right around here. When I clicked right there, I feel like it kind of went too far. I'm going to actually bring that part back. And then right around here, I might even add, just switching to white, I might kind of add a little bit more to this so that I can kind of see some of that path kind of come in this way. I kind of like that look. And right about there, I think that's pretty nice. If I add more right here, now I can kind of see a little bit more evidence of that stream or that path, which again, I think is kind of nice. Down here though, I'm going to make sure that I'm hiding most of the sunset kind of image right through there. And again, I'm just going to come back to this part. I keep kind of clicking on it. I feel like it gets a little bit too light when I do that, so I'm just going to undo that. But I've got a really nice image kind of right about now. The only thing that I'm seeing is this kind of hard edge right around here on the bottom. Now, for me, whenever I'm not sure where a particular pixel is kind of living, I try to take a good look at my image and turn eyeballs on or off just to see. And in this case, I turned the eyeballs on and off the cloud layer, and I can see that this edge of the cloud layer is really what is there. So I'm just going to take my move tool, just going to drag this cloud layer down a little bit so I don't have that hard edge, and then I can kind of just reposition this just like that. Okay, I'm going to bring in my last couple of images from this. I've got, if I go into my downloads, we had birds flying, the trees, and the eagle. The eagle I already have open, so I'm just going to grab the tree and the birds flying and just drag them down right on top of my Photoshop document. Okay, I'm going to start with the tree. The tree has a lot to it. We want to try to select the tree as best we can, but because of all the leaves and so forth, it's going to be a little bit tricky. I like the select subject. I think that's really kind of the best, most interesting way to do this. It looks like it gets a pretty good selection. I'm going to actually make a mask and just see what it looks like. I don't know, you guys, it looks pretty great. So I'm going to keep the mask on there. I was thinking we might have to do a color adjustment or a color selection, but this looks actually pretty fantastic. So we've got our mask. I'm going to take my move tool, drag and drop this right about here. I do want it to be the very top layer though. So notice that I'm dragging it up my layer list. I'm going to probably position it right about here, but I want it to be smaller. So I'm going to have it kind of live right about here or so, maybe kind of right, kind of almost in the middle, but blocking the sun a little bit, maybe right about there, just kind of off to the side. And I'm going to hit return. And as I zoom in, if you find that, like mine, there's a little bit of a kind of funny haze on it, what you can do is we can go over to the mask. We can move our mouse over to the mask, hold down Command and click once. That's going to create that selection for us. And then from here, I can go to the word. I kind of want to almost like contract this a little bit and like make a little bit more of it go away. So I'm going to go with my selection up to the word select, down to modify, and then down to where it says contract. And I'm going to contract it by, oh my gosh, like 1 pixel, and click OK. I still have that selection. What I'm going to do now is choose select inverse. And now I'm going to take my paintbrush, make sure I hit my letter D so that I'm using black. Make sure with my brush opacity that it's at 100%. And I'm also going to put my flow at 100%. And I'm going to take this paintbrush, and just because now I am on the mask, let's make sure we're on the mask. Now I can just paint over the whole thing with black. It's not going to look like it's doing much, but what it's doing is it's taking that little 1 pixel that we contracted this and getting rid of some extra stuff. So now when I do deselect, you can see it definitely got rid of a couple of things here, which I'm actually okay with because I think this is going to be so small that we're going to be fine. If I do Command Z just to undo it and then deselect it, this was my image before. So there's detail, but there's not a tremendous amount of detail, but I'm okay with that. If you decide that you just don't love the way that that looks, what you can do is open up your history. Your history little icon is right here. I can just scroll up to right before I chose contract. I'll go to the one right before it. And if I deselect that, this is what I had before. So maybe 1 pixel was a little bit much. What I could do is maybe half a pixel if I want to. Let's see if that looks okay. I'm going to go back over here to my little icon, my mask for this tree, Command click on it. That's going to give me the marching ants. Again, I'm going to choose select, modify, and then contract. This time instead of 1 pixel, I'm going to hit 0.5. And just make sure, like I did, that you undid that step if you weren't happy with it. 0.5, so 0.5 or even just 0.5. As I click OK, then I'm going to choose select inverse. And again, this is where I'm going to take my paintbrush, and painting with black, I'm just going to kind of paint around it just like that. When I deselect, you can see actually 0.5 was kind of the way to go. Sorry, I led you astray here for a minute. But 0.5 looks much better. And the other thing that I'm going to do is go down to the bottom of this little tree, and I'm just going to make my mouse a little bit smaller and just kind of take my black brush and just kind of click a couple of times at the bottom here, just so that it looks like some of this grass from the photo is coming in front of it. If you're like me and you also have a couple of little pieces right here that you kind of want to get rid of, feel free to do that. If there's any other weird pieces that you think just look kind of disconnected, you can feel free to mask those out. I've got a couple up here that look like they're a little bit disconnected, but for the most part, I think that is pretty good. Okay, so I've got my nice tree in here. I do think that the tree is a little bit kind of very vibrant green, so I'm going to try to give it kind of a little bit more of this brownish color. To do that, I'm going to choose my little half white, half black circle, my adjustment layers. I'm going to do hue and saturation, and again, I'm going to make sure that I clip this hue and saturation layer just to the layer of the tree, which reminds me I haven't called this tree yet, so I'm just going to write that in there. Okay, so back on this little hue and saturation layer, I'm going to double click right here just so I can get this. I'm thinking as I scroll down here, I'm going to choose colorize just so that I can kind of give it that same kind of brownish tone. I might increase my lightness, see if I can go over here to this like orangey kind of yellow part. I might need to kind of increase my saturation, maybe even my lightness just a tiny bit. Go back and forth in here just a little bit. I don't love the reddish tones. I want to get a little bit more of that orange. And I feel like maybe right around there might be good. I could also kind of pull the saturation back a little bit. It's real orange if I pull it to the right. If I pull it to the back, I've got a little bit. Maybe I'll leave it at like 49 or 50%. All right, so that's looking pretty good so far. Again, I would go up to the Word file and just do a quick save if you could. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is bring in that eagle. By the way, you still have this tree document. You can close it. Don't save. You have the eagle here. The eagle actually doesn't have a background or anything in there, but it is an indexed file, which is going to cause a problem for us. So before I do anything, I'm just going to change the eagle. So image mode, I'm going to put it at RGB just so that it doesn't give me any trouble. Now I can take my move tool, drag and drop the eagle onto this document, Again, I'm going to kind of flip it a little bit here. So I'm going to choose Edit, Transform. Let's do a flip horizontal. And you can see that there's a little bit of a white edge kind of around here. Let me zoom down or move down a little bit. I'm going to decrease his size, but keep him fairly large. I don't love that little white edge. So again, what I'm going to do here, if I move my mouse directly over this icon, I can hold down the Command key, click my mouse once. That's going to, again, create a selection around this. And I'm just going to do this. I'm going to go to the word Select, choose Modify. I'm going to choose Contract. And I think, again, if we choose, see if I learned my lesson. Let's do 0.5, contract it by half a pixel, and then I'm just going to add a mask. And hopefully when I do that, it does look like it gets rid of that other little white outline. So I'm going to just rotate this a little bit, maybe scale it down, but really kind of keep it kind of large, almost so that he's kind of like flying or soaring, kind of like right here, kind of almost above the tree. And then I'll just hit my return key. All right, the next step, and by the way, you can get rid of that eagle document. You don't have to save it. Now I've got this little birds flying image that looks like this. This one's going to be a little bit interesting. We're not going to make a selection to start with, but rather I'm going to take my this entire document. So I'm going to take my move tool, drag and drop this right about here. You're going to find that it comes in really large. So I'm going to scale it way down, probably make it about this size or so. And a really fast, really easy way for us to take care or get rid of white space, especially when we know that it is white, we can go right to our blend mode on our layer tab and we can choose multiply. Now check that out. When I choose darken or multiply, what it does is it actually gets rid of all of that background color. Now I'm going to choose, I'm thinking that there's a little bit of a tinge of dark edge when I do multiply. I'm going to actually do darken. And I'm just going to scale these guys down a little bit. Now, I want them to kind of fly off to the side. And I've got a ton of birds right here. And they're all going, for the most part, it looks like they're flying off to the left. I'm going to have them kind of flying after this, or like they're kind of taking off or flying towards this eagle. So I'm going to choose Edit, Transform. Let's do Flip Horizontal. And we'll kind of position them right around here or so, maybe even rotate it just a little bit. And then I'm going to hit return. And there's definitely a few in here that I don't need. So on this layer, and I'm going to call this my birds flying layer, this is where I'm going to probably make a mask. And anytime that I make a mask and I don't want certain things to show up, I'm basically just going to take black or my paintbrush and just kind of get rid of a couple of them. Because I have my mask, I can do that pretty easily. I don't like how there's so many. I just feel like they're kind of clustered here a lot. So I'm going to get rid of a good amount of them so that I can kind of make this a little bit more streamlined. I like certain ones, but again, we just don't need a million birds here. So you guys can kind of feel free to delete or get rid of any that you think are just too much. I'm going to get rid of a lot here. Get rid of these guys. And maybe we'll get rid of those. We'll keep some of these down here, but some of them are just a little bit too close together, in my opinion. And so now I've got kind of something like that. I might get rid of those too as well. Any that are kind of partially transparent like this, you can see that I kind of missed that. Right now I still have my hard edge, or I'm sorry, my soft brush. If I were to make my brush edge a little bit harder, it would be easier to kind of get rid of some of these. So I'm going to do something like that. Now I've got a handful of little birds. I might rotate them a little bit more, maybe even scale them down a little bit more and have them kind of flying so that they're kind of coming off the back of the bear, just like this. Anytime I make a change like that, I want to make sure that I do hit the return key. Yeah. What's up? Okay, folks, the last thing, we're almost done. We're just going to make this bear look like he's a little bit grounded. Right now, he kind of just looks like he's floating, so we're going to put a little bit of shadows beneath him. To do that, I'm going to go to my layer tab, make a new layer. We're going to call this one Shadows. And I would actually drag this layer probably pretty far down underneath the bear, maybe over the clouds. But as you can see, it's like third up from the bottom. This is just an empty new layer. I'm going to take my brush tool, and I'm thinking that as I take this, I kind of want my brush not to be like perfectly circular. So I'm going to go up here, and I'm just going to kind of make my brush, see how I'm just grabbing, let me zoom in so you can see it. My brush would look like this. I'm just grabbing it so that it's kind of more flat, and I'm definitely going to put the hardness back at 0%. Probably put, you know what, I'll probably keep my opacity at 100%, but let's see what size I should use here. Maybe just adjust my brush size as I go. All right, so now I've got it at about 500, hardness of 0. My color is black. I'm right on this layer, and I'm just going to kind of click just a couple of times right here. Same thing right here. This one I might make my brush a little bit smaller just because it doesn't look like as much of the surface of the foot is touching it. And then right here I'll make it a little bit larger. Maybe click 2, maybe even 3 times. And so now I've got some little shadows. They're a little bit dark for my taste though. I'm probably gonna kind of bring them back maybe to about 65 or 70%. And I can, even if I need to, just kind of bring them upward just so that there's no kind of weird white space underneath them. Use your arrow keys if need be. So I'm thinking that that looks a little bit better. It looks definitely like he's more grounded. I'm gonna do FF Command 0 just so that you guys can kind of see this. This is what it'll look like kind of in its entirety when it's done. Pretty good, pretty interesting, kind of double exposure. In this case, you know, more than a double because we used maybe 6 or 7 or 8 pictures. But hopefully you get the idea how you can kind of use the edge of different photographs. You can combine masks, layer masks, clipping masks for that matter, and really kind of painting with a really soft edge brush just to get that same kind of a look. So once you've got this, I would say do another quick save just to save your Photoshop document. Then we're going to go to export, choose export as. This is where we make sure in the top right that we're working with a JPEG. Quality as high as you can put it. We'll click export. I like to put things right on my desktop so that I can find them. I'm going to hit export, and then you're going to take this JPEG file and just attach it to this Bear double exposure classroom assignment. So good luck. Our next assignment, you guys are actually going to be taking and doing a double exposure, but you're going to be controlling all of the images that you use. And so I'll be showing you the rubric for that so that you know exactly how many images you need to use and so forth. So nice work.